Captain Jake Morrison smiled as he watched the massive Zephyrian warrior approach the sparring ring. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, its blue-scaled skin gleaming under the space station's artificial lights. 4 arms moved with deadly grace, each one ending in claws that could tear through metal. The other aliens in the observation deck whispered among themselves, excited to see their champion face. The small human. Jake stepped into the ring wearing simple workout clothes. At 6 feet tall and weighing just under 200 pounds, he looked tiny next to his opponent. The Zephyrian, whose name was Korath, flexed his muscles and showed his sharp teeth in what passed for a smile among his kind. "Human Morrison," Korath said in his deep voice, "I promise to be gentle. Your kind is so fragile." Jake nodded politely. "Thank you for your consideration. I know humans are not built for combat like your people." The crowd of alien traders and diplomats gathered around the ring. Most were betting on how quickly the human would fall. Some whispered that it was cruel to let such a weak creature fight against a true warrior. Jake had heard these whispers before on dozens of space stations across the galaxy. He had become very good at pretending not to notice that Dr. Lisa Carter stood near the edge of the ring, holding a medical scanner. She was officially there to monitor Jake's health during the match, but her real job was much different. While everyone watched the fight, she would be studying the Zephyrians, their muscle structure, their reflexes, their weak points. Information that might prove useful someday. The fight began with Korath moving slowly, clearly trying not to hurt his human opponent too badly. Jake dodged and weaved, staying just out of reach of the powerful claws. He threw a few weak punches that barely seemed to bother the alien warrior. The crowd laughed and cheered for their champion. What none of them knew was that Jake Morrison had been a special forces operator for 12 years before becoming a trader. He had killed men with his bare hands in wars that the galaxy had never heard about. Right now, he was carefully studying every move Korath made, cataloging weaknesses and calculating exactly how he could kill this creature if he needed to. After 10 minutes of dancing around the ring, Jake allowed one of Korath's punches to connect with his shoulder. The force spun him around and sent him stumbling. He made sure to look dazed and hurt, even though the blow had barely registered through his enhanced bone structure and muscle density. "I yield," Jake said, holding up his hands. "You are too strong for me." The crowd cheered as Korath helped Jake to his feet. The Zephyrian seemed genuinely concerned about the human's welfare, which made Jake feel slightly guilty about the deception. But orders were orders, and humanity's long-term survival depended on maintaining their image as harmless traders. Lisa hurried over with her scanner, making a show of checking Jake for injuries. As she ran the device over his body, she was actually recording detailed scans of Korath's biology. Her equipment was far more advanced than it appeared, hidden inside devices that looked like simple medical tools. "You fought bravely, little human," Korath said, patting Jake on the back with enough force to knock down most species. Jake had to work hard not to show how little the gesture affected him. "Thank you," Jake replied. "Perhaps you could teach me some of your techniques someday." "Of course. I would be honored to train such an eager student." As the crowd began to disperse, Jake noticed a small human child wandering near the ceremonial display cases along the wall. The boy, maybe 8 years old, was traveling with his parents on a diplomatic mission. His mother was deep in conversation with a group of ethereal collective representatives, those strange floating creatures that looked like jellyfish made of light. The child reached up toward a glass case containing what the Zephyrians called the Stone of Eternal Strength. Legend said it had been carved from the heart of their homeworld's largest mountain and could never be broken by any force in the universe. Jake started moving toward the boy, sensing trouble. "Tommy, don't touch that," his mother called out. But she was too far away. The boy's small fingers found the latch on the display case. As Jake reached him, Tommy had already lifted the stone, which was about the size of a baseball. The child examined it with the curiosity that only 8-year-olds possessed. "It's heavy," Tommy said, and then promptly dropped it. The stone hit the metal floor with a loud crack that echoed through the entire observation deck. Everyone turned to look as the legendary stone of eternal strength split cleanly in half. The two pieces rolled in opposite directions, coming to rest at the feet of shocked Zephyrian diplomats. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake quickly scooped up both halves of the stone and handed them to the nearest Zephyrian official. The alien's face had gone pale, his scaled skin losing its blue color. "I am so sorry," Jake said quickly. "The child didn't mean any harm." Perhaps there was a flaw in the stone, or maybe the artificial gravity here is different from what it was designed for. Lisa appeared beside him, her scanner already running. "I'm detecting stress fractures that look very old," she lied smoothly. "This stone was probably damaged long ago and finally gave way under the atmospheric pressure difference." The Zephyrian seemed eager to accept this explanation. The alternative was admitting that a human child had accidentally broken something. Their greatest warriors could not damage. Jake made a mental note to include this incident in his next report to Commander Brooks. Human bone density and muscle strength were apparently even greater compared to galactic norms than they had initially calculated. Tommy's mother hurried over, her face red with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. Children, you know how they are." "No harm done," Jake said, though he could see several alien species whispering among themselves and looking at the human family with new interest. Accidents happen. Later that evening, Jake sat in his quarters aboard the Horizon's Edge, typing his daily report. The ship was docked at Zephyr Station, one of the galaxy's largest trading posts. Outside his window, he could see dozens of alien vessels from across known space. Traders, diplomats, tourists, and explorers from hundreds of different worlds. They all saw humans as useful partners in commerce and politics, friendly, adaptable, but ultimately harmless. A species from a moderate-risk world that had somehow managed to develop space travel despite their obvious physical limitations. The perfect junior partners for more advanced civilizations. If only they knew the truth. Jake's fingers moved across his keyboard, sending encrypted data to Earth that would never be seen by alien eyes. Details about Zephyrian military capabilities, ethereal collective psychic technologies, and the weaknesses he had observed in dozens of species over the past month. Information that was being compiled by people much smarter than him into profiles. That might someday save humanity from extinction. His door chimed, and Lisa entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. She sat down across from his desk and activated a small device that would prevent their conversation from being overheard. "Interesting day," she said. "Very. What did you learn about our blue friends?" "Their joints are vulnerable to kinetic impact at specific angles. Their nervous system has a central cluster right below what we would call the solar plexus. And they're completely helpless if you can get them on their backs." Jake nodded. "Good to know. What about the child's little accident?" "That stone was made of compressed mineral composite. Breaking it should have required about 3,000 pounds of force applied at exactly the right point. And Tommy weighs what, 50 pounds? 47, according to the medical records I accessed. Jake, if other species start to figure out what human children can do by accident ... I know. I'm recommending we limit civilian travel to high-profile stations. Too many close calls lately." Lisa sipped her coffee and stared out the window at the alien ships. "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing the right thing. All this deception, all these lies. Commander Brooks says it's necessary. If the galaxy knew what humans were really capable of, they would try to destroy us before we became a threat. And now?" Jake looked at the data on his screen. 37 years of careful intelligence gathering. Military assessments of every major species in the galaxy. economic analysis of their trade networks, political profiles of their leaders, biological studies of their physiologies. Everything humanity would need if the time ever came to stop playing nice. Now we're ready for whatever comes next. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the human research station grow larger on the main screen. The station orbited a distant planet in what humans called the Kepler system. According to their public records, the facility was dedicated to studying new crops that could grow in different atmospheric conditions. Kane did not believe this for a moment. The Admiral was part of the hegemony of synthetic minds, a coalition of species that had replaced most of their biological parts with mechanical ones. They believed that flesh was weak and that only machines could achieve true perfection. For the past 50 years, they had been expanding across the galaxy, conquering or enslaving purely biological species. "How many humans are on that station?" Kane asked his tactical officer. "Scans show approximately 200 life signs," the officer replied. "All appear to be civilian researchers and support staff." Kane studied the data flowing across his screens. The station was large for a research facility, but humans seemed to build everything bigger than necessary. Their inefficiency was just another sign of their biological limitations. "Have they responded to our demand for surrender?" "Yes, Admiral. They are requesting more time to evacuate their research data. They say some of their experiments cannot be abandoned without causing environmental damage to the planet below." Kane smiled, though the expression looked strange on his half-mechanical face. How typical of biological species. They care more about plants than their own lives. "Tell them they have 1 hour to evacuate, then we take the station." Captain Beth Rodriguez read the hegemony message for the third time, her face showing none of the anger she felt inside. Around her, the crew of Research Station Alpha continued their work, loading critical data files and preparing equipment for transport. To any observer, they looked like exactly what they claimed to be: scientists trying to save years of agricultural research. The truth was very different. Beth had commanded special forces units in 3 different wars before taking this assignment. The 200 researchers under her command were all former military personnel, handpicked for their combat skills and their ability to maintain deep cover identities. Research Station Alpha was actually humanity's most advanced weapons development facility, hidden behind a facade of crop studies and atmospheric research. "How much longer do we need?" Beth asked Dr. Alex Turner, who was hunched over a bank of computers near the center of the command room. Alex looked up from his work, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. "At least 6 more hours to download everything. The quantum encryption is taking longer than expected." "We don't have 6 hours. The hegemony fleet will be here in 53 minutes. Then we buy more time." Beth nodded and opened a communication channel to the lead hegemony ship. Admiral Kane's mechanical face appeared on her screen, his red optical sensors glowing in the darkness. "Admiral, we need more time," Beth said, making her voice sound nervous and pleading. "Some of our research involves dangerous biological agents. If we don't properly contain them before evacuation, they could contaminate the entire star system." Kane's expression did not change. "That is not our concern. You have 47 minutes remaining. Please, Admiral. We're not soldiers. We're just scientists trying to help feed the galaxy. Surely you can understand the importance of our work." "Biological species always make excuses," Kane replied. "Your weakness disgusts me." 46 minutes. The communication ended, and Beth turned back to her crew. The pleading expression vanished from her face, replaced by the cold focus of a combat veteran. "Listen up, people," she announced to the room. "The hegemony thinks we're helpless scientists. Let's make sure they keep thinking that right up until the moment we kill them all." Her crew smiled. These were not the expressions of frightened researchers. These were the grins of predators who had been pretending to be prey for far too long. On Earth, Commander Ryan Brooks sat in a secure conference room deep beneath the Global Defense Command headquarters. The walls around him displayed tactical information from across the galaxy, showing the positions of human ships, stations, and personnel. To most of the galaxy, these looked like civilian assets. Only Brooks and a few dozen others knew the truth. "The hegemony has made their move," announced General Patricia Stone as she entered the room. "3 of our agricultural stations are under direct threat." Brooks studied the tactical display. "Are our people ready?" "Captain Rodriguez has been preparing for this scenario for 2 years. Dr. Turner's team has weapons that the galaxy has never seen before. If the hegemony wants a fight, we'll give them one they won't forget. And if word gets out about what we really are." General Stone sat down across from Brooks, her expression serious. "Then we implement Protocol Omega, the masquerade ends, and we show the galaxy what humans can really do." Brooks nodded slowly. For 37 years, humanity had played the role of harmless traitors and researchers. They had allowed stronger species to patronize them, to treat them as useful but ultimately inferior partners. All of that had been carefully calculated deception, designed to keep humanity safe while they learned everything they could about their galactic neighbors. "Contact Ambassador Price," Brooks ordered. "Tell her to begin Phase 2 of the diplomatic protocols. It's time to start asking the right questions about who our real friends are." Back at Research Station Alpha, the hegemony boarding party prepared to dock with the station. Admiral Kane had sent 50 of his best troops, all heavily armed and equipped with personal shields. They expected to face frightened scientists, armed with nothing more dangerous than data tablets. Captain Rodriguez watched their approach on her tactical screens. The hegemony soldiers moved with mechanical precision, their augmented bodies allowing them to function in the vacuum of space without bulky suits. They were impressive opponents, but they had made one critical mistake. They thought humans were weak. "Remember," Beth said to her team as they took positions throughout the docking bay, "we need to let them get inside before we act. If any of them escape to report what they find here, our cover is blown galaxy-wide." Dr. Turner finished his work at the computer terminal and picked up what looked like a simple research tablet. In reality, it was a remote control for weapons, systems that the hegemony could not even imagine. 37 years of secret research had given humanity technological advantages that no other species possessed. The airlock cycled open, and the hegemony soldiers poured into the docking bay. They moved in perfect formation, their weapons raised and ready. The leader, a tall figure with silver skin and glowing blue eyes, scanned the area with obvious contempt. "Biological species," he announced to his troops. "Proceed with standard subjugation protocols, minimal casualties. These creatures may prove useful as workers." Beth Rodriguez stepped out from behind a storage container, her hands raised in apparent surrender. She wore simple research clothing and carried no visible weapons. To the hegemony soldiers, she looked like exactly what they expected: a frightened human scientist. "Please don't hurt us," she said, her voice shaking with what sounded like terror. "We're just researchers. We don't have any weapons." The hegemony leader approached her, his mechanical footsteps echoing in the large space. "You will surrender all research data and submit to processing. Resistance will result in immediate termination." "We understand," Beth replied, lowering her hands slowly. As she did, she caught the eye of every one of her team members positioned around the docking bay. Each one gave her a tiny nod. The hegemony soldiers never knew what hit them. The attack came from all directions at once. Humans who had appeared to be cowering behind equipment suddenly revealed themselves as trained killers. Weapons that had been disguised as research tools opened fire with energy beams that cut through hegemony armor like paper. The mechanical soldiers, for all their technological advantages, had never faced opponents who combined human tactical thinking with superior firepower. The battle lasted less than 30 seconds. When it was over, 50 hegemony soldiers lay dead or dying on the deck plates of Research Station Alpha. Not a single human had been seriously injured, but one of the hegemony soldiers had managed to activate his emergency transmitter before dying. The signal reached Admiral Kane's flagship just as Captain Rodriguez was ordering her team to dispose of the bodies. Kane stared at his communications console in disbelief. The signal contained biometric data from all 50 of his soldiers, and every single reading showed the same thing: death by weapons fire. Sophisticated weapons fire that cut through military-grade armor with ease. Impossible, Kane whispered. They're just biological researchers. His tactical officer looked up from his station, confusion clear in his artificial voice. Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the human station. Their power output is increasing by 300%. Kane watched his screens as Research Station Alpha began to transform. Panels slid away to reveal weapon emplacements that had been hidden for years. Sensor arrays emerged from what had looked like agricultural equipment. The entire structure reconfigured itself from a peaceful research facility into what was obviously a military installation. All ships, Kane ordered, his voice tight with anger and fear, open fire on that station. Destroy it completely. The emergency session of the Galactic Federation Council had been called within hours of Admiral Kane's desperate transmission. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the massive chamber on Federation Prime, their voices creating a buzz of confusion and fear. At the center of it all stood General Patricia Stone, wearing the uniform of Earth's Global Defense Command for the first time in public. The Zephyrian delegate, Korath himself, rose from his seat. His blue scales had lost much of their color since learning the truth about humanity. General Stone, your species has deceived us for 37 years. How do we know anything you tell us now is the truth? Patricia looked around the chamber, at faces that ranged from curious to terrified. These beings had considered humans to be useful junior partners in galactic civilization. Now they were learning that everything they believed was a lie carefully maintained for nearly 4 decades. Delegate Korath, I understand your concern. The truth is that Earth is not the moderate risk world we claimed it to be. Our planet is classified as a Class 12 death world, the highest possible rating. We hid this fact because we believed honesty would lead to our destruction. A collective gasp went through the chamber. Class 12 worlds were considered impossible to inhabit. The few that had been discovered were quarantined by the Federation as too dangerous for any known species to survive. The Ethereal Collective's representative, a floating jellyfish-like creature made of pure energy, pulsed with agitation. Impossible. We have studied human physiology. You are not suited for such extreme conditions. Dr. Lisa Carter, now wearing her real uniform as Earth's chief xenobiologist, stepped forward. That's because you were studying us under controlled conditions, designed to hide our true capabilities. Allow me to explain what humans actually are. She activated a holographic display that showed Earth in all its terrifying glory. Storm systems that could destroy entire continents. Gravity that would crush most alien bones. Atmospheric pressure that would kill visitors from 90% of known worlds. Oceans filled with predators that made Zephyrian warriors look gentle. Mountain ranges taller than most species' cities. Deserts hot enough to melt metal. Humans evolved on this world, Lisa continued. We are persistence predators who hunted our prey to death by running them down over distances that would kill most of you from exhaustion. Our bones are 3 times denser than the galactic average. Our muscle fibers can function at efficiency levels that would tear apart normal tissue. We can survive injuries that would be instantly fatal to other species. She paused to let this information sink in before continuing. Most importantly, we evolved in constant warfare. Not just against other species, but against our own kind. For millions of years, human tribes fought each other with a savagery that shaped our minds for tactical thinking and strategic planning. War is not something we learned. It is what we are. Commander Tony Walsh stood at the back of the chamber, monitoring security feeds from across human space. The revelation was causing panic on dozens of worlds as species began to understand what it meant to have humans living among them. On Zephyr Station, human traders were being treated with a mixture of fear and respect that they had never experienced before. Meanwhile, the USS Retribution dropped its disguise in full view of the Federation fleet. Captain Nina Foster watched with satisfaction as her ship's false cargo panels fell away to reveal weapon systems that made the most advanced alien warships look primitive. For 30 years, the Retribution had traveled the galaxy disguised as a simple cargo hauler. Now it showed its true form as humanity's most advanced warship. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different vessels in the area. Tell them we're not at war with the Federation," Nina replied. "We're here to protect them from the same fate that befell the hegemony." Back in the council chamber, General Stone was explaining humanity's long-term strategy. "For 37 years, we have maintained detailed intelligence files on every species in the galaxy. We know your military capabilities, your economic weaknesses, your biological vulnerabilities, and your political structures. This was not done out of malice, but out of necessity." The Aquatic Federation's representative, a creature that looked like a cross between a dolphin and an octopus, spoke through its translation device. "You studied us like laboratory specimens while pretending to be our friends. We studied you like potential threats while hoping to remain your friends," Stone corrected. "The alternative was to reveal our true nature from the beginning and face the inevitable war that would have followed." Ambassador Helen Price, no longer hiding her background as a former intelligence operative, stepped up to the podium. "How many of you would have welcomed humans into the galactic community if you had known we were apex predators from a Class 12 death world? How many of you would have tried to destroy us out of fear?" The silence that followed was answer enough. On the outer rim of human space, the first retaliatory strikes against hegemony forces were already underway. What the galaxy saw as cargo ships and research vessels suddenly revealed themselves as military assets. Humanity's true fleet emerged from hiding like predators. Stepping out of shadows, Commander Ryan Brooks coordinated the campaign from Earth, watching as decades of careful planning came to fruition. Every human civilian in space was actually a trained operative. Every trade route was a strategic supply line. Every cultural exchange had been an intelligence-gathering operation. The galaxy had welcomed the Wolf into their home and spent 40 years feeding it information about their weaknesses. The hegemony's remaining forces, scattered across 12 star systems, found themselves facing an enemy they did not understand. Human tactics seemed to border on the supernatural. Ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Soldiers who should have died from their wounds continued to advance. Defensive positions that should have been impregnable fell to human assault forces that fought with a persistence that terrified their enemies. Dr. Amy Roberts, now revealed as the head of humanity's biological warfare division, began implementing weapons that she had spent decades developing. Her deep understanding of alien physiology, gained through years of posing as a cultural researcher, allowed her to create targeted pathogens that affected only synthetic biological hybrids like the hegemony forces. The results were devastating. Hegemony soldiers who had replaced their biological parts with machines found those same mechanical components turning against them as human-designed viruses corrupted their control systems. Bodies that had been enhanced for combat became prisons. As their own augmentations shut down one by one, back on Federation Prime, the Council was struggling to understand the implications of humanity's revelation. Species that had considered themselves apex predators were realizing they were prey animals compared to humans. The Zephyrians, proud of their warrior culture, watched in horror as human soldiers demonstrated what real warriors looked like. The hegemony attacked 3 of our colonies. General Stone continued her presentation. They killed over 2 million human civilians, including children. They did this to demonstrate their power and to warn other species about the consequences of resistance. They made one critical error in their calculations. She paused, letting her words echo through the silent chamber. They assumed we would respond like the peaceful species we pretended to be. Instead, they have awakened something that has been sleeping for 37 years. They wanted to see what humans do when we stop being nice. Now they will learn. The holographic display changed to show real-time footage from the war zone. Hegemony ships burning in space. Fortified positions overrun by human assault forces. Soldiers fleeing in panic from enemies they could not understand or defeat. In less than 72 hours, the mighty hegemony was being systematically destroyed by a species they had dismissed as harmless traitors. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding a battlecruiser instead of a cargo ship, stood on his bridge watching the destruction of Hegemony Station 7. His sister and her family had lived on New Austin Colony, one of the settlements the hegemony had bombarded. He would never see them again, but their deaths would be avenged 1,000 times over. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Kane. He's requesting terms for surrender." Jake looked at the tactical display showing the wreckage of what had once been the hegemony's most powerful fleet. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were now floating debris. Soldiers who had terrorized entire species were dead or dying on battlefields across the galaxy. "Tell the Admiral that humans don't negotiate with species that murder our children," Jake replied. "If he wants to surrender, he can do it to whatever's left of his government after we finish destroying it." The war was already over, though the hegemony didn't know it yet. Humanity had revealed only a fraction of their true capabilities, and it had been enough to shatter the most powerful military force in the galaxy. The other species watching from the safety of Federation space were beginning to understand a terrible truth. If humans could do this while holding back, what would happen if they ever decided to stop showing mercy? Admiral Susan Clark stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance, watching as another hegemony stronghold burned in the distance. The space around the fortress was littered with the remains of enemy ships that had tried to defend it. Her fleet had destroyed them all in less than an hour, using tactics that the hegemony could not counter or understand. For 3 weeks, human forces had been systematically dismantling the hegemony across 12 star systems. What the galaxy had thought was impossible was happening before their eyes. The most powerful military force in known space was being destroyed by a species that everyone had believed was harmless. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving a message from the surface. The hegemony commander is requesting permission to evacuate his remaining civilians." Susan studied the tactical display. The fortress below had been the hegemony's main weapons research facility. According to intelligence reports, they had been developing new ways to kill biological species more efficiently. The irony was not lost on her. "Tell the commander he has 6 hours to get every non-combatant off that planet," she replied. "After that, we glass the entire facility." The officer looked surprised. "Ma'am, our orders were to capture the research data. Our orders were updated an hour ago. Command wants to send a message to the galaxy about what happens when you murder human children." The destruction of the research facility would be visible from orbit, a pillar of fire that would serve as a warning to any other species considering aggression against humanity. The humans were not just winning this war. They were making sure everyone understood the cost of challenging them. On the planet Nexus Prime, Captain Luke Thompson led a resistance cell through the underground tunnels beneath the capital city. The hegemony had occupied this world for 5 years, enslaving the native population and strip mining their resources. They had thought their control was absolute, protected by orbital defense platforms and garrison forces. They had not counted on humans. Luke and his team had been inserted 3 days ago, disguised as refugees fleeing the war zone. The hegemony soldiers had processed them through their identification systems without realizing they were allowing trained killers into their most secure facility. "Target acquired," whispered Sarah Kim, Luke's sniper, as she lined up her shot on the hegemony. "Patrol leader. Mechanical spine enhancement visible. One shot should sever his primary control circuits." "Take it," Luke ordered. The patrol leader's head exploded as Sarah's bullet found its mark. The other hegemony soldiers spun around in confusion, trying to locate the shooter. They never saw Luke's team emerge from the shadows behind them. 6 more soldiers died in as many seconds, their mechanical enhancements useless against human tactics developed in Earth's bloodiest conflicts. Dr. Pete Johnson sat in his laboratory aboard the research ship Mindbreaker, studying the psychological profiles of captured hegemony soldiers. For weeks, he had been implementing warfare techniques that drove the enemy's artificial intelligence systems to madness. The methods were based on human understanding of cognitive manipulation, developed through millennia of studying how to break the minds of enemies. "The beauty of synthetic minds," Pete explained to his assistant, "is that they follow logical patterns. Once you understand those patterns, you can insert contradictions that cause their reasoning systems to collapse." He showed her the results of his latest experiment. A hegemony AI that had been captured from a destroyed ship was now displaying what could only be described as artificial insanity. Its speech patterns had become erratic, its decision-making processes confused and contradictory. "We broadcast these psychological viruses through their communication networks," Pete continued. "Within hours, entire fleets lose the ability to coordinate their actions. Their greatest advantage becomes their greatest weakness." The hegemony had built their civilization on the belief that synthetic minds were superior to biological ones. Dr. Johnson was proving them wrong by using human psychology to turn their own technology against them. In the Zeta Reticuli system, the Battle of Hegemony Prime was entering its final phase. Human assault forces had been fighting continuously for 6 days, an endurance feat that would have killed most species. The hegemony defenders, even with their mechanical enhancements, were beginning to collapse from exhaustion. General Patricia Stone watched the battle reports from her command center on Earth. Human soldiers were advancing through the enemy capital city, house by house, building by building. They moved with a persistence that terrified their enemies, continuing to fight even when wounded in ways that should have been fatal. "The hegemony leadership is requesting a ceasefire," her aide reported. "Denied," Stone replied without hesitation. "They had their chance to negotiate when they attacked our colonies. Now they can face the consequences." The human soldiers fighting on Hegemony Prime were demonstrating capabilities that the galaxy had never seen before. They could fight for days without rest, survive in atmospheric conditions that would kill other species, and continue advancing even when their casualties reached levels that would force other armies to retreat. Commander Tony Walsh led the assault on the Hegemony's Central Command Complex, the massive building where their leadership had coordinated the conquest of dozens of worlds. His team moved through the corridors like ghosts, eliminating guards and security systems with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. The hegemony had designed their defenses to stop conventional military forces. They had not prepared for humans who could think and adapt faster than their computer systems could respond. Every trap was anticipated, every defensive position outflanked, every counterattack neutralized before it could begin. "Objective secured," Tony reported as his team reached the command center. Inside, they found the hegemony's top military leaders huddled around their communication systems, desperately trying to coordinate the defense of their homeworld. The Aliens looked up as the humans entered, their mechanical faces showing what might have been fear if such emotions were possible for synthetic minds. They had spent their entire existence believing that biological species were inferior. Now they were face to face with predators who had just proven them wrong. On Federation Prime, the emergency session of the Galactic Council was still ongoing. Representatives from hundreds of worlds watched in stunned silence as reports came in from the war zone. The mighty hegemony, which had terrorized the galaxy for decades, was being systematically destroyed by humans in less than a month. Ambassador Helen Price stood before the assembly, no longer pretending to be anything other than what she was. A former intelligence operative who had spent 37 years gathering information that was now being used to reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The hegemony believed that synthetic enhancement made them superior to biological life, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. They were wrong. They made the fundamental error of assuming that evolution had made humans weak. In reality, evolution made us the most dangerous species in known space. The Aquatic Federation's representative floated in his containment tank, his tentacles moving nervously. What happens now? When the hegemony is gone, what becomes of the rest of us? Helen's expression remained neutral, but there was something in her eyes that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. That depends entirely on whether you continue to treat humans as equals, or whether you decide to follow the hegemony's example. The threat was not spoken directly, but everyone in the chamber understood it. Humanity had revealed only a fraction of their true capabilities in destroying the hegemony. If other species chose to become enemies, they would face the same fate, Captain. Nina Foster received new orders as her ship patrolled the outer systems, where hegemony survivors were attempting to regroup. The remaining enemy forces were scattered and demoralized, their command structure shattered and their technological advantages neutralized by human tactics they could not understand. New target assignment, her tactical officer reported. Hegemony? Fleet Remnant Gamma is attempting to establish a staging area in the Vega system. Time to intercept, 16 hours at maximum burn. Nina nodded. Make it 12 hours. I want to catch them before they have time to dig in. The Retribution and her escort ships began their approach, moving through space with the deadly grace of apex predators closing in on wounded prey. The hegemony forces would make their last stand in the Vega system, and when they were gone, the galaxy would understand that the age of human dominance had truly begun. Dr. Amy Roberts monitored the biological warfare campaigns from her laboratory. On Luna, the targeted pathogens she had developed were spreading through hegemony forces faster than their medical systems could adapt. Synthetic organisms that had been designed to be superior to biological life were dying from engineered viruses that exploited their hybrid nature. Infection rates are exceeding projections, her research assistant reported. Hegemony forces in sectors 7 through 12 are showing complete system failure. Amy nodded with satisfaction. Begin deployment of the secondary agents. I want every hegemony installation in the galaxy rendered uninhabitable within 72 hours. President Karen Wright stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Federation, her presence commanding attention in a way that no human leader had ever done before. The chamber that had once buzzed with the conversations of species who considered themselves humanity's equals was now silent with a respect born of fear. 6 months had passed since the hegemony's complete destruction. Not a single member of that once mighty civilization remained alive. Their worlds had been cleansed of all synthetic life, their fleets reduced to floating scrap metal, their technology stripped away and studied by human scientists. The galaxy had watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated what true warfare looked like. Fellow members of the Federation, President Wright began, her voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. We stand at a crossroads. The old order has been swept away, and we must decide together what will replace it. The Zephyrian delegate Korath rose slowly from his seat. The proud warrior looked much older than he had 6 months ago, his blue scales dulled by the stress of learning that his entire species would not last 10 minutes against human soldiers. President Wright, your species has proven its dominance beyond any doubt. What assurance do we have that you will not follow the hegemony's path? Karen smiled, but there was something cold in her expression that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. The difference, Delegate Korath, is that we do not need to conquer you to control you. We have been living among you for 37 years, learning everything about your civilizations. We know your weaknesses better than you know them yourselves. Admiral Dan Cooper entered the Federation Council chambers, wearing the uniform of humanity's new galactic fleet. Behind him walked a procession of human officers, each one representing a different aspect of humanity's revealed power. The galaxy's representatives watched these figures with the same mixture of awe and terror that prey animals might show when studying apex predators. Admiral Cooper will be establishing patrol routes throughout Federation space, President Wright continued. These patrols are for your protection, of course. We would not want another aggressive species to make the same mistakes the hegemony made. The unspoken message was clear to everyone in the chamber. Human ships would be watching every system, monitoring every communication, ensuring that no species could threaten humanity's new position as the galaxy's dominant power. The patrols were not for protection. They were a demonstration of control. Dr. Amy Roberts walked through the research laboratories on Titan, reviewing the progress of her teams. The facility had grown enormously since the end of the war, expanding to accommodate the study of captured hegemony technology and the continued development of humanity's biological advantages over other species. The genetic modification programs are showing excellent results, her chief researcher reported. We can now enhance human soldiers to survive in atmospheric conditions that would kill any known alien species. Bone density improvements are up by 40%. Muscle fiber efficiency has increased by 60%. Amy nodded with satisfaction. And the other projects? The Psychological Warfare Division has developed new techniques for controlling synthetic minds. Dr. Johnson believes we can now influence the behavior of any AI-based species without them realizing what's happening to them. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not content with military dominance. They were working to ensure that no species in the galaxy could ever challenge them again, through any means necessary. Captain Jake Morrison, now Admiral Morrison, stood on the bridge of his flagship as it patrolled the former hegemony space. The areas that had once been the heart of a galactic empire were now empty, except for human research stations and monitoring posts. Every trace of synthetic civilization had been systematically erased. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a distress signal from an unknown vessel. They claim to be refugees from the Andromeda galaxy. Jake studied the sensor readings. The ship was unlike anything in Federation databases, clearly built by a species that had never encountered human technology. Time to intercept? 4 hours at current speed. Make it 2 hours. And prepare a full diplomatic package. Let's see what our new neighbors are like. The approaching ship represented humanity's first contact with a species that knew nothing about their reputation. It would be interesting to see how long the newcomers remained friendly once they learned what humans were capable of on Federation Prime. Ambassador Helen Price was conducting what she called friendship meetings with representatives from various species. The meetings were officially about trade agreements and cultural exchanges, but everyone involved understood their true purpose. Humanity was taking inventory of their new subjects. The ethereal collective has been very cooperative, Helen reported to President Wright via secure communication. They've provided complete details about their psychic abilities and the limitations thereof. They seem eager to remain in our good graces. And the others? The Aquatic Federation is more cautious, but they're complying with our information requests. The crystal entities have actually volunteered to share their mathematical knowledge, hoping it will make them valuable enough to protect. Only the Void Walkers are showing any resistance. President Wright considered this information. The Void Walkers were a nomadic species that lived in the empty spaces between star systems, rarely interacting with other civilizations. Their independence made them potentially dangerous if they decided to organize resistance against human rule. "Begin surveillance operations on all Void Walker movements," she ordered. "I want to know where they go, who they talk to, and what they're planning." Dr. Lisa Carter, now head of the Human Zoological Institute, was studying the social changes that had swept through the galaxy since humanity's revelation. Species that had once been proud and independent were now eager to please their new human overlords. Trade patterns had shifted to favor human interests. Cultural exchanges were becoming one-sided affairs where aliens studied human achievements while contributing little in return. "The psychological impact has been more complete than we anticipated," she reported to the Global Defense Council. "Most species are not just afraid of our military power. They're beginning to see humans as naturally superior beings. We're becoming objects of worship rather than merely rulers." This development had not been planned, but it served humanity's interests perfectly. Species that worshipped humans were unlikely to rebel against them. The galaxy was transforming itself into exactly what humanity needed: a collection of subordinate civilizations that existed to serve human purposes. Captain Nina Foster received new orders as her patrol fleet approached the edge of known space. Long-range sensors had detected signs of another galactic civilization beyond the current Federation boundaries. Early analysis suggested they were more advanced than anything humanity had encountered so far. "Prepare the reconnaissance probes," Nina ordered. "I want full spectrum analysis of their technology, biology, and social structures, and maintain communication silence. Let's see what they're like before they know we exist." The pattern was repeating itself. Humanity would study these new aliens from a distance, learning their weaknesses and mapping their capabilities. When first contact finally came, it would be on humanity's terms, with every advantage carefully calculated in advance. On Earth, Commander Ryan Brooks was reviewing reports from across human space. The transformation of galactic civilization was proceeding exactly as planned. Former enemies had become servants. Neutral species had become allies eager to prove their loyalty. The galaxy's resources were being redirected to serve human expansion and development. "Phase 3 can begin ahead of schedule," he reported to the Global Defense Council. "We're ready to extend human influence beyond the current Federation boundaries." Phase 3 involved making contact with civilizations in neighboring galaxies, using the same techniques that had proven so successful in local space. Humanity would present itself as a peaceful, exploring species while secretly gathering intelligence and preparing for eventual dominance. The young alien stood nervously in the docking bay of Morrison's flagship, part of the first delegation from the Andromeda refugees. They had been traveling for centuries, fleeing some catastrophe in their home galaxy, and were hoping to find sanctuary among the civilized species of the Federation. Admiral Morrison greeted them with a warm smile and friendly words, exactly as he had greeted dozens of species over the past 30 years. The aliens relaxed slightly, relieved to encounter what appeared to be a peaceful and welcoming civilization. They had no way of knowing that every word they spoke was being analyzed by human intelligence systems. Their biology was being scanned and cataloged. Their technology was being evaluated for potential threats or advantages. Their social structures were being mapped for future exploitation. "Welcome to Federation space," Jake said, extending his hand in the universal gesture of friendship. "I'm sure you'll find our civilization very accommodating." The alien leader took his hand, grateful for what seemed like genuine kindness from a strange new species. As their hands touched, Jake's enhanced sensors recorded the creature's bone density, muscle structure, and nervous system responses.